I'll see you guys next time. Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most credible voice in true crime. Today, July 18th, 2 years ago, something really interesting happened in the Chris Watts phone data review in terms of the timeline. I was quite tempted to do this again as a double billing, 2 episodes in one day, but because of what happens on July 18th, I think we need to go into some detail, and so that's what we're going to do today. For those of you who don't know, I've written a 9-part book series called Two-Face on the Watts case. Some books were written before the discovery came out, others as the discovery came out, and then others afterwards, sort of going up until the February confession in 2019. And then there's a second series that's not complete yet, a trilogy, the Silver Fox trilogy. I've written 2 of the 3 books already. Those books are quite well reviewed so far. For those interested in going off and studying the phone data review on your own, it's on crimerocket2.com. All the posts are there. They're free to watch, just as they're free to watch here on YouTube. Obviously, when I narrate, you get a little bit of extra insight and maybe a little bit of extra analysis. Also on YouTube, I've just posted a really interesting analysis and discussion with a French researcher based in Paris, a guy called Matt Pichter, and that is on, I think that's the previous episode to this one, where we talk about the research that goes into the still kind of mysterious death of Vincent van Gogh, which happened about 11 days from today, 130 years ago. So that's quite an interesting discussion. It's about 90 minutes long. If you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, share especially amongst your networks. For those interested in the Laurie Vallow case, there's some interesting new developments there. Who has been her visitor in jail? What is her financial situation? When is the court case now scheduled to happen? All of that was decided in a recent and heard in a recent preliminary hearing. I'll be doing part 4 in my ongoing review of the case, and also looking at the Dateline documentary that is exclusively to Patreon on the $2 tier. So go and check that out. Okay, and let's get started. So this is episode 18 in the ongoing hashtag 2 years ago today CW series, and something kind of troubling happens kind of in 2 ways, in 2 areas on this particular day. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to is Shan'ann's post today, 2 years ago, on Facebook. It was posted on the 18th of July 2018, and Shan'ann writes, "Rubbing her baby," she says. And it's a picture of Shan'ann, I think at home in Aberdeen, at her parents' home, sitting on the couch. Bella's lying next to her, and Bella has her hand on her mother's stomach, and it's kind of a tender moment. Bella looks comfortable, Bella looks relaxed, and even a little bit happy. And it's midsummer, obviously, in Aberdeen, and this was around about a month before Watts appeared in court for the first time. And what I want you to look at is the shirt that Shan'ann is wearing. Now compare that shirt to what we see in the doorbell footage. And then let's look again at that shirt, a little bit closer, zoomed in. And let's look again at the shirt in the Ring doorbell footage. Can you see it's the same shirt? It's ironic that she was wearing this shirt when she was murdered. She was wearing a shirt with the word love on it. Can any of you remember what clothing Bella was wearing when they found her remains in the oil tank? So on Crime Rocket 2, I posted a review of the phone data under the title Introducing the Secret Calculator, and that is actually the other thing that happened on this particular day. Going through the timeline of July 18, we see that by the end of the day, Watts was looking into vacation rentals in Myrtle Beach. This suggests the calls early in the day was Shan'ann telling him she refused to see his family. So Nutgate didn't just happen on the 9th, which at this point was 9 days ago. There were repercussions to it, and part of the repercussions were along the lines of, all along the plan was that Watts would join Shan'ann, I guess, in the last week of her trip. Interestingly, I'm not sure if her family even knew it was going to be a 5 or 6 week trip. I think they were under the impression it was going to be a 2-week trip, or just a couple of weeks, but it was certainly longer than they imagined. In any event, Watts, I guess the flight had already been booked, and now there was a change of plan, and the change of plan was, you're going to come to North Carolina, and we're not going to see your parents. We're going to do something else. We're not going to stay with your parents. We are going to go and stay in Myrtle Beach. And that seems to be why Watts was looking at vacation rentals in Myrtle Beach. Bear in mind that this was 2 weeks before Watts was due to join his family in North Carolina. So it was just 2 weeks before he was going to fly out. And so there was a change of plan, and Shan'ann was kind of laying down the law to him and saying, you coming here, but we are not staying with your parents. We're not going to see them. And that is sort of established on, as I said, July 18th at 05:26. Again, another early call. And all of these calls are around about the same time every morning. You'll notice that. Also, again, the calls following are almost at the same time in the afternoon. They basically bracket when Watts goes to work, or just before he goes to work, and when he returns. Now bear in mind, Watts has sort of got to get up early. He's got to, just think about it like this. Watts is at Kessinger, he's spent the night there. Now he's got to get back home to take these calls, which means he's getting very little sleep over a long period of time, where he is living a double life. He's probably having sex at night, but when he leaves Kessinger can probably get another half hour's sleep or so. Each time he's losing maybe an hour of sleep, if it's as little as that. So by the time Shan'ann calls him, Watts needs to be kind of available, whereas Kessinger doesn't need to be in that situation, right? Watts needs to leave Kessinger, drive home, get ready at home or get ready wherever, and then take the call from Shan'ann. That's part of every single day, and it's happening early in the morning. So he's used to these furtive fumblings, not in the middle of the night, but before the sun comes up, which is why what happened on August 12th, going into the night, was also fitted into that pattern. Anyway, at 05:34, Watts called Shan'ann and held a nearly 4-minute conversation. So she calls him, and then about 4 minutes later he calls her, and they talk again. Wouldn't it be amazing if we knew what was said during those conversations? I mean, only Watts knows at this point. At 09:46, for the first time, Watts transferred assorted images of Kessinger, some semi-nude, into the secret calculator application. This is the first time the secret calculator application comes into being. It's the first time it's mentioned. And although we don't know what happened in those conversations, we can infer from what is happening around them what probably happened in the conversation. So the fact that Watts, for the first time, makes this big transfer of photos that would get him into trouble. It's compromising photos of Kissinger, sometimes semi-nude, and then also himself. He transfers all those to the secret calculator app. And the fact that he has the secret calculator app at this point tells you that things have gone up a gear. In a previous episode I spoke about when did he start thinking about Roggen, the area there, as a disposal site for bodies. Well, the fact that he's already installed a secret calculator means he's already gone up a level in terms of hiding his activity. And once again, it's also in plain sight. The secret calculators looks like an ordinary calculator on his phone, and he's just, everything is hidden just under slight veneer, if that makes sense. So if you peel back the layer, then everything is revealed. But if you don't peel back the layer, everything looks normal to those around him, for example to Shan'ann. And that's what's quite clever about it, quite sneaky about it, and it's quite effective because you're not coming up with very elaborate stories. You just make something slightly different, and then you have a casual explanation for it, and it kind of worked for once. So bear in mind, all of this happened at work. He was at work when he transferred these images. Now, we have no idea whether Kissinger suggested this to him, whether she said, you know, maybe he said, you know, I'm going to Myrtle Beach, when I, you know, maybe kept Kissinger up to date on what was happening, and then maybe she said, you better make sure your wife doesn't see those pictures of me. Bear in mind, she knows that he's got pictures of her because she's sending them to her. She's there when he takes them. So that must have come up. Now, whether she suggested anything along those lines, we don't know. But more than likely, the thing did come up that you need to make sure she doesn't see these pictures. Now, bear in mind the unfair kind of situation where Kissinger can see Shanann's photos. She can see her Facebook if she chose to, but Shanann's completely in the dark about Kissinger. So Kissinger's got that advantage over Shan'ann, that she kind of knows what Shanann's up to, not only on Facebook but from her husband. Shan'ann doesn't know, but Shanann's kind of preoccupied with Nutgate and Thrive. She's still like, okay, let's do the vacation rental and whatever. So anyway, the images that are transferred on the 18th are 13, 14, 32, 33, 35, 36, 37, 44, 46, 61, 2430, 2432, 2440, 2443, 2453, 2464, 2490, 2499, 2502, 2504, 2509, 2513, 2549, 2556 and 2559. 41 images in all, if I'm understanding the phone data review correctly. What's interesting with those images is they start off with double digits, 13, 14 going up to 61. So, you know, there's 13, 14, then there's a space, then it's 32, 33, 35, 36, 37, then a small space, then 44, 46. And what that seems to show is a sort of spacing of time and other photos between those photos. That makes sense, right? Then there's a big jump from 61 to 2430. Now one wonders what happened between 61 and 2430. Which photos were those that were taken right in the beginning? And what happened between 61 and 2430? From 2430 it goes up to 2502 and until ultimately 2559. So that's just an interesting way to look at the pace of the relationship. and by looking at the numbered photos on the phone. And that's not all. Additional images of interest found in this application, but with no dates, were listed below on this phone data review. So a whole bunch of other photos, and it does suggest, based on the numbers of these photos, it does suggest that these photos may have been taken at a later date, because they are all 5,000 and something, from 5158 to 5295. And we've only seen a small handful of these images. We haven't seen all that many of them. So at 1926, Watts searched Google for, and it's spelled wrong in the phone data review, for Shorehaven, North Myrtle Beach. And so that was clearly what he was thinking about the whole day. He'd spoken to Shan'ann earlier in the day, twice, and then at the end of the day, quite late actually, he was searching for, I guess, a place to stay. I don't know whether Shan'ann was saying, will you pay for it, or will you find a place for us? But one assumes that he would have to pay for it. I don't really get the sense. Shan'ann may have controlled the finances, but the finances came from Watts. So that's also an interesting thing to consider. We know this change of plan weighed heavily on Watts. Watts told investigators on February 18th he was angry at Shan'ann for separating him from his family. One wonders what he meant exactly. And for when exactly? When was he separated? You might say, I don't think it's true. He wasn't angry. But you can imagine that he's thinking now about traveling to North Carolina, so he's already starting to hide away images. He would do the same thing the day he traveled. So he's clearly premeditating that aspect, just hiding away. How do I hide it away? I have to hide it away. I also think it's important to, not that this is idiosyncratic to Watts, so I think any other cheating person, whether you are married, whether you are young or older, I think any cheating person would probably do something like hide photos on their phone. They'd either delete them, or I'm not sure what other alternative there was. I guess it would depend on how much content there was. I think a much simpler way is just you wouldn't necessarily let somebody else look at your phone. So I don't know what your relationship is with your spouse, but do they have access to your phone? Do they know your password? Do you know theirs? How often do you look at their phone? How often do they look at your phone? Are you comfortable with them looking at your phone? Are you comfortable looking at their phone? Interestingly, a friend of mine came to visit quite recently and asked my advice on some images that were transferred to her phone. And I think they were transferred by WeTransfer. She was unfamiliar with it. I've used it quite often, though not on my phone, on my computer. And she was sort of installing software, but at the same time very afraid that she was going to kind of give access to hackers or something. And we were kind of sitting at opposite ends of the table, and she was asking me what to do. Should I install this? Should I do that? And I was actually trying to maintain distance in terms of I didn't want to be right beside her when I was helping her. I was trying to do it from kind of a distance. But eventually she was a little bit uncertain, and then after she'd installed it, she wasn't sure how to find the photos, and so eventually I had to take the phone from her, and now I've got her phone in my hand, and now I've got to find her images for her. And obviously at a glance and I think it's the first time I'd ever seen it. At a glance, I suddenly glimpse some of her WhatsApp images and some of her, images that she's just catching her interest, and ultimately found these images that she was looking for. But what I'm trying to say is, I know this person quite well, and I felt a bit funny looking at her images. I don't know how she felt. And I certainly don't have people going through my phone all the time. So that seems to me would be the most obvious thing to do, is that you would, if you were having an affair, you would just make your phone private, that someone can't access it. And of course, in Chris Watts' situation, he knew that Shan'ann would kind of demand access to his phone, because she used his phone to do her social media via his profile on his phone. So her taking his phone from him was kind of a given. And bear in mind that this seemed to be him moving images on his private phone. So he was already anticipating Shan'ann taking his private phone and going through it. This is also, I think, why Shan'ann thought he wasn't having an affair, because she did go through his phone. She kind of had that kind of sway over him, where if she asked him for his phone, there's no way he wasn't going to give it to her. What you can also see here is how careful he is to avoid a confrontation. Is 2 weeks before he even goes, he's making sure he's wiped out all traces. So he's being very, very careful, right? But I also think, as careful as he is, like I said, I don't think he's getting enough sleep every night. And Thrive may be giving him the illusion that he's got plenty of energy, but the human being is like a car engine. You can, put fuel in it, but it's eventually going to need maintenance. It's going to need to be the equivalent of rest in terms of a human being needing to sleep. You can't just, the engine can't just do its thing all the time. Eventually it's going to need a little bit of maintenance. Not sure if that analogy works very well, but I think you get what I'm saying. So Watts is probably already visualizing himself at Myrtle Beach with Shan'ann, and he's now not with his parents, so he's going to be shoulder to shoulder with Shan'ann a lot more maybe than he thought. This is not a very good situation for him, because he is having an affair and he doesn't want to communicate with Kissinger. And one of the chances we know that he did communicate with Kissinger, where he was actually caught out, was on August 6th, where his parents said, "Jeepers, how come you're on the phone all the time? Are you having an affair?" And he was, and he said he was, because they knew he wasn't on the phone to Shan'ann. They were hardly talking. They were hardly communicating, although they were texting. What's interesting about the fact that when they were together in North Carolina, because they communicated so seldom, in other words, verbally directly, they ended up communicating quite a lot via text. Now imagine this. They together in North Carolina, but they're not sleeping in the same room. They're not often speaking to each other, and so the communication is via text. Bizarre, isn't it? And this was one of the ripple effects of Nutgate, which lasted as long as 4 weeks from around about this time. Sorry, about 3 weeks from this time. So did he, when he was talking about being separated from his family, did he mean his children, his parents, specifically after Nutgate, or did Nutgate remind him of the enmity that had persisted throughout his entire marriage, including the wedding? Now, if I can presume to imagine Chris Watts' psychology, and I don't presume to know him inside out, but I would imagine there may be something similar with a lot of men, but also women, which is when you find yourself, maybe to some extent you're gravitating away from marriage because you are unhappily married, but maybe also you're gravitating away because there's someone else that you like. there's some other situation that's better. There's some happiness beyond the confines of the marriage that is sort of beckoning, right? Now, I think when that situation starts to happen, I think one subconsciously starts to find reasons to be negative and critical, reinforcement, in other words, for why your marriage isn't working. So I think it's perhaps to deal with one's guilt for what you're doing, to find reinforcement to leave. And so I think Nutgate did remind him that there had been arguments between Shan'ann and his mother before Nutgate. There had been persistent gripes and grudges before Nutgate. And at the time, we weren't all that sure what they were, but we eventually found out that they did go back, way back. They went way back to the wedding day, which was a catastrophe from a certain perspective. Shan'ann is all smiles and she has all the people around her that she wants, but Watts didn't really have the people around him that he wanted, and he seemed to be prepared to go along with that. But later on, it seems like, for example, now, Nutgate was reminding him that things weren't that great, and later on he would say they got into debt from their wedding day. You know, that I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if the debt that happened on that day really was some kind of anchor, some kind of millstone lasting until, weighing up as part of the bankruptcy. Maybe debt was a factor, but what about other things like income not working, buying a big house, having 3 children? I think those are much more financially damaging or difficult things to deal with over the long term, medical bills and so on, than just paying for a wedding. Weddings can be expensive, but it didn't seem like it was a very big wedding anyway, ultimately. The fact is, Watts, I think, used Nutgate as an excuse to also think about how things weren't good with Shan'ann and people around him in general. So he was already starting to justify whatever was starting to crystallize in his mind, if that makes sense. Now bear in mind, he's hiding images away so that she can't see it. But in some part of his mind, he's got to know these two realities are irreconcilable. She's pregnant, and Nicole Kessinger wants to give him a son, and he's only got so much money. What is he going to do? He can lie for now, but what is he ultimately going to do? And that's why I say, at some point, he's probably getting a sense of vertigo, almost, the sense that, oh shit, I'm going to have to do something drastic here. Because once again, if Shan'ann reacted like this over possible nuts in ice cream, over Cece possibly having a reaction. Bear in mind, Cece never ate the ice cream. She never went to hospital. It was all over the possibility of it. Now imagine how that terrified Watts if he told her, if he just said, Shan'ann, I'm cheating on you, I love somebody else. I think Watts knew that there would be an explosion, and he would be there would be a scorched earth policy. And Nutgate was kind of the last advertisement to that, to say, you crossed me and you're going to see what's going to happen. And so Watts did what he was doing with a secret calculator, he did in terms of the murders as well. He solved the problem by hiding it away, by hiding them away, by killing them secretly, by disposing of their bodies quietly, by not confronting Shan'ann, by not telling her what was going on, right? So again, I would say that this conforms to what an introvert would do, what an introvert would feel. Someone left a scathing response on YouTube recently, I think on the previous video, someone telling me that they've got 27 years experience and I need to go and study up on follow other YouTube channels to educate myself. And she says, I'm not sure you know what the definition is of a narcissist, and whenever you mention that he's not a narcissist, I really cringe. These are her words. This person doesn't seem to respect the fact that I've written 11 books on the case, that I've also written more than 80 books on other cases, that I studied psychology at university, that I've studied and researched way beyond narcissism. I've read up on sociological aspects of human behavior. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you with all that. But it's this kind of response on YouTube that makes me want to get off YouTube, because I'm not here on YouTube to address this kind of thing. Someone who's saying, I've been studying narcissism for 27 years, what do you know? So I'm going to address this particular thing at the end of this episode. But anyway, let's just continue with the phone data review. And there's a screen grab in the phone data review of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation report from Tammy Lee that was following the visit to the prison. And he mentioned that his father took the entire week off when they were in North Carolina. And I think what that means is when he was in North Carolina. But Shan'ann booked them for 5 days at the beach instead. I get the feeling from the way this is worded, again, we don't know for sure what happened, but I get the feeling Shan'ann decided where they were going to stay, and Watts kind of Googled it to find out what it was going to cost. That's kind of just the impression that I have. One aspect that bothered him most was how Shan'ann's grudge had now rippled around to include his father as well. This was like Watts losing an important psychological anchor. And by doing that, he no longer wanted to be a father or a husband for or with Shan'ann. Of course, Kessinger also provided plenty of fuel for the psychology. She was also encouraging him tacitly or overtly not to be a husband, and that he could be a father with her, kind of thing. On July 18th, Watt seemed to realize for the first time he would be heading back to the wolf, so to speak. Now, this is from his perspective. I'm not calling Shan'ann a wolf. I'm saying from his perspective as this cheating, cowardly, philandering husband, he's now going back to, it's almost like when the cat's away, the mice will play. The mouse going back to the cat. I'm just trying to convey it in a sense that he feels like he feels like Shan'ann is a controlling, intimidating personality, and he's got to hide and cower and be careful, if that makes sense, from his perspective. And so he needs to cover his tracks if he wants to keep his affair going. Sometimes I give this little puppy something to eat that I don't really want to give it, like a piece of meat or something, but something that is besides his dog food. And I'm just talking about the literature that I've read say you must only, the Schnauzer's digestive system is sensitive, only give them, a certain kind of dog food, and I'm paying quite a lot for the dog food I'm giving him. But sometimes he sort of begs me, and then I will maybe give him a piece of meat or something, which I think is okay, some meats have got a lot of salt in them, some of them have got spices and so on. But anyway, when I give it to him, he tends to run off and sort of eat it somewhere, almost like he's trying to hide away from imagined other dogs or from me. Or anyway, the whole point is that he doesn't want someone to take it away from him. And it's almost the same thing. I'm saying Watts is behaving in that way. He wants to keep his treasure trove of sexy pictures, but how? The massive transfer of semi-naked images on July 18th was the first seditious move on kind of a big scale. It meant it wasn't just moving all of these images. He didn't just move one image. He moved a whole trove of them. But that wasn't the only thing. He also had to download the app. He also had to Google the app. And I don't know if we've got evidence of where he searches for secret calculator app. I mean, I don't think that's there, which shows there are gaps in the phone data review. But probably it happened very close to this time, because the necessity to use it happened now. Watts deliberately put it in a place, Watts deliberately put in place a system to deceive and undermine his wife and family. And this is giving you an idea of how his criminal mind works, not his psychology, his criminal mind. And that is, he tries to hide something under a very thin layer. And that is exactly the same thing he did when he reversed up the driveway and he said, well, no, I was loading tools. I was going to work, I was loading tools. When he disposed of the bodies at Roggan, he said, no, I was going to Roggan. There was a well that was leaking and I had to go and look at it. Well, of course, he'd gone out of his way on the Friday to go to co-workers to say, do you mind if I go there kind of on my own? Do you mind if I go and sort it out? And it was a little bit irregular. But he could tell the police and he could tell other people, well, of course, yeah, I went to Roggan. That was where I went. And he probably knew that even if they tracked his movements, no one would believe that the children were put in the oil tanks. It wouldn't occur to people because it was just under a thin layer of kind of believability. And even the police, even the investigators, the FBI, most of us, when we were presented with the thought of the children in oil tanks, most of us thought that's impossible. That's very unlikely. There's no way he would have put them in the tanks. You know, it just didn't seem. It wasn't the first thing that anyone would think about. Almost not even the last thing. But that is what's criminal psychology, and it's subtle and it's sneaky. It's not about telling a big story like someone like Letitia Stork or Laurie Vallow or someone like that. It is more about being very sneaky and then not saying very much. I mean, his story is basically just, they'd vanished. I came home and they'd vanished. No one was home. Shan'ann said she was going to take the kids to a friend. That was all that he was really saying. Think about the secret calculator again as an analogy for Watts as well, for Watts as a person as well. He was using a secret calculator, a secret password, using something in plain sight to hide information that could be devastating to his wife, children, and his own future. If he wasn't careful, Shan'ann might take the phone but be none the wiser. This gave him at least the seed of an idea. What if he could do something but hidden by technology, by vivid sensors, cell phone messages, GPS tracking, but hidden in plain sight, hidden inside an average morning going to work like he always did? In other words, what if he could use the data to actually almost support his story? And he was getting the same thing with Vivint, that he could kind of use the little gaps to his own advantage. And that's why I said the secret calculator is an analogy for Watts himself and who he started becoming in terms of his criminal capacities as soon as he had installed it. He is a secret calculator too now. And I put that in bold in the blog post. He is a secret calculator too. And this got the ball rolling. Every time he hid away an image, he was thinking, about deceiving Shan'ann, beating her at her own game, winning this little war that was on, and ultimately it was becoming, how do I leave her? How do I divorce Shan'ann without divorcing her? How do I get rid of her without paying the price? How do I have an affair without anyone seeing? Well, through the secret calculator. How can I get rid of them and keep that secret too? So I don't think he wanted to go there. He didn't want to be there. He wished he could make it disappear so he could get back to the new love of his life. In other words, I don't think he wanted to go to North Carolina. And this is the thought that he sat with quietly ruminating. I mean, if he never went back to North Carolina, and Shan'ann never went on the trip to Arizona, would Watts have had the time to kind of think, I don't want this and I do want that? Or would Shan'ann have whipped him back into shape and got him sort of wrapped around a finger really quickly so that he couldn't think for himself? And anyway, while he was ruminating, Shan'ann continued confidently to change plans and call the shots. So I mentioned earlier about this YouTube person, this person commenting on YouTube, just who seems to have no respect for my work, and if I say something she cringes. I'm going to do another week or so of this series on this channel, hashtag 2 years ago today CW. On around about the 25th, I'm going to discontinue this series on this channel. It will then continue on Patreon under the $1 tier. So in other words, the last week, I think, of July will shift from being free on YouTube to the $1 tier on Patreon. I will also obviously encourage you guys to go to the blog. You know, if you're complaining that $1 a month is a lot to pay for content, well, go and read the posts that are all free to read on crimerocket2.com. I put the links in all the descriptions, so you can go and look at that. I just don't enjoy I know I have a lot of support on YouTube, but I also have people who just don't stop making nasty comments, and then I'm not going to sort of cast pearls before swine. I'm not going to continue putting up content. Every now and then a comment does really annoy me, and this was one of them. You've studied narcissism for 27 years. Well, I've studied crime for a lot longer, and this is a true crime case. This isn't a case about narcissism as much as you think it is. There is narcissism in this, but it's got nothing to do with Chris Watts. It's got something to do with someone else that no one wants to talk about. And as I say, I think most people listening to this might actually disagree, and that's why I don't want to engage on this topic, especially with people who haven't read my books, don't want to read my books, and certainly don't feel it's worth paying a cent for. But there are people who feel it is, and it's for you guys that I will continue this series on Patreon. And as I say, you can pay $1 a month and get a heck of a lot of other content there as well, better than what is here. So make sure you get your ticket to Patreon in the next couple of days, next week or so. On about the 25th will probably be my last episode in this series on this channel. So you've kind of got a week to sort of say goodbye and I guess, get through a couple more days of the timeline. If you haven't subscribed, please do like, share, leave a comment. As I say, head on over to Patreon for the remainder of the series. It's Patreon/TCRS. Thank you for listening.